And we are live. Welcome to the MLB Strategy Show. It is Friday, August 13th. Yes, Friday the 13th. That should be a great sign. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Adam Scher, and we are here to break down a 14-game MLB slate. Not once, but twice. So we'll see you again in a couple hours. I have already talked a little bit about some wacky NFL bets. Make sure you're checking out the breakfast menu. Make sure you're hitting the like button on this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. But before we do anything else, Adam, how are you?
I'm good. Kind of disappointed we don't have two slates today. I enjoyed that yesterday, even though I didn't make money on baseball, but really enjoy those. But 14 gamers, so nice to change things up, get a little bit bigger slate.
I never ended up finishing up and looking at everything, but I guess it was Brewers, A's yesterday in the early slate, and those were your only options.
Brewers, A's, Marco Gonzalez went absolutely nuts. Brandon Woodruff got knocked out of the game in like the third or fourth inning by a line drive. Wasn't pitching great anyway. Bassett had a good game. Means didn't. But yeah, it was Brewers and A's.
Oh, man.
Dodgers suck.
By the way, you should have kept that 71% Marco Gonzalez.
Yeah. It didn't matter, like, because I had basically it was just because I had like 100% Woodruff anyway, so I didn't really have Gonzalez plus Bassett.
Well, we have 14 games to talk about right now, and plenty of time to do it. But Mike Campbell with an interesting question that I want to talk to you about. How did you celebrate Chris Davis's retirement yesterday?
It's actually, I thought it was kind of bittersweet. Like it kind of bummed me out because as much as I think he needed to retire, and it was a long time coming. Like he still was such a big part of those really good Orioles teams, which are the only good Orioles teams that I've watched since I was like 7. So it kind of bummed me out that like he didn't get any sort of like resurgence, like, maybe have some sort of semi-decent season and then retire. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I guess I wasn't as excited about it as I kind of thought I would be when I was waiting for him to retire.
When he was actively playing and hurting you.
Right.
Yeah. Now that he's gone, makes it a little sadder. I get it. Well, we do have a ton of time for sure, but we do have a lot of games to talk about. So
we can just take our time and run this into the deeper dive.
Honestly, that would be fine by me. Jordan Burkhardt says, I honestly thought the dude retired like 3 years ago. I mean, he kind of did. He probably would have been better off, to be fair. What did you think of the Field of Dreams game last night?
I didn't see any of it. I saw the open, but like I saw the opening just via like video on Twitter. I thought it was really, really cool. Just, from a nostalgia standpoint, I thought it was really cool. And I hope they don't just start doing it every year. I think they should just like do stuff like that. Maybe find like a different thing that would be cool to do next year. But I feel like that's one of those where like it was really, really cool this time. And by the time they do it the third or fourth time, it's just going to be stupid. I
thought it looked cool. I think Field of Dreams isn't good, so it's not like a movie that I'm attached to.
How old were you when you watched it?
Child.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, like, I liked it as a kid. I haven't seen it since. I know someone was tweeting about how like it doesn't stand the time test, and I was like, well, yeah, it wasn't made for you to watch it when you were 35.
I read that your tweet actually. I thought that was regarding Sandlot.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you're right. It was Sandlot. It was
not that that's like how my decision process was going. I never thought it was like an interesting baseball movie that I would go back to a lot. I go back to Major League all the time. That is just a no-brainer for me. Probably because it had like the style of comedy that I was interested in, even as like an 8-year-old. Rookie of the Year is one that like triggers to me a little bit more. I was never a big Natural guy. I was never a big Field of Dreams guy. Oddly enough, not a big Bull Durham fan, and that's the one that surprises me.
I like Bull Durham. I didn't see it when I was young. Like I saw it more recently. But yeah, Sandlot, Rookie of the Year.
Sandlot.
What'd you say?
Obviously Sandlot.
Yeah,
that one.
Sandlot and Rookie of the Year are the ones that like I really, really liked as a kid. I liked Field of Dreams, but like it wasn't on the same level. And then Major League obviously is fantastic.
If you were a kid that played baseball and didn't like Sandlot, that must be like the smallest group of people on the planet. That was just a no-brainer.
I think those kids probably quit playing baseball not long after.
I would imagine they certainly did. because that movie was everything. That was just, you talked like those guys. The amount of quotable stuff that came out of it, countless. So yeah, either way, it looked cool last night. I'm with you. I think it'd be cool if they did it as other things from, like, if they did a Sandlot game like that, that would be sick. Complete with dog in left field that eats the balls when you go yard. Like, I'm in for that. Full stop. All right, let's talk baseball for today. Oh, Dave Carroll just said Angels in the outfield was the dumbest. You better not say that on a Jazz Raz show, because Ben Raza will be not happy. That is his jam. He likes terrible movies, though.
I want to say I was like middle of the pack on Angels in the Outfield. Like, it entertained me, but I didn't like it as much as the other movies.
I think that I watched that movie as a kid. Let me find, when did Angels in the Outfield come out? Because that's
really, I want to say like 1992, 1993, but I could be wrong.
July 15th, 1994. So I was 9. And I feel like when I watched that movie, I realized it wasn't good. Even as a 9-year-old.
I was 4 when it came out. So I didn't realize it wasn't good.
I don't remember Joseph Gordon-Levitt being the guy that's in it. I'll be perfectly honest. I don't really remember Matthew McConaughey being that guy. I do remember Christopher Lloyd. I do remember Danny Glover, but I don't think I remember it being Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and I don't have a clue what McConaughey was doing in that movie right now. I need to go back and figure that out.
Yeah, I definitely don't remember him. I remember Danny Glover. I remember Christopher Lloyd, and kind of like, I don't know if I remember that it was Joseph Gordon-Levitt, but like I know at this point that it was.
Yeah. And one that we didn't mention so far, Little Big League, was always one that was really close to my heart because it was more like the analytics version of a baseball movie. It's just like, oh, you can't bunt with your good hitters. And I was just like, yes. Anyway, let's start it off. Nats and Braves, 4.1 run implied total for the Nats, 4.9 for the Braves. Although it's possible that this still doesn't have an actual line. Do we have confirmation on the Nats yet? No, we don't. All right. From what I've seen, Josiah Gray, starter for the Nats, potentially. Charlie Morton going for the Braves. Have you seen Gray?
Have I seen what?
Have you seen Josiah Gray as the Nats starter for today? That is my expectation for right now. That
sounds good to me.
Fantastic. Not in our ownership projections because clearly they don't have an official starter named. There is no one. It's TBD, and TBD is not a guy you can roster on DraftKings and FanDuel.
He pitched the 7th. He's listed on DraftKings. That's what I'm going with for now.
8,100 on DK, 6K on FanDuel. Didn't really show up for me in anything that I was doing, so I'm not super concerned. Charlie Morton, on the other hand, 20% owned on DK, 9% owned on FanDuel. What are your thoughts on Morton today? Because that's pretty big ownership for a 14-game slate.
Yeah, it's a lot of ownership, but it's a ridiculously inexpensive price tag going up against the Nats. Like, how is this guy $8,300 against anybody, much less a team that has essentially 2 major league hitters on it? So it's a lot of ownership, but I think it's well deserved given how inexpensive he is.
I was actually a little surprised that it was all the way up to 20. I'm a little bit more interested going above him to Flaherty, which we'll get to in a bit. No problems getting to Charlie Morton at 8,300, especially against this Nats team that is not exactly a large powerhouse. And it's possible that the one random line that I found for this game ends up painting Charlie Morton in a slightly different light. The overall total goes down and Morton ends up looking better. So I'm reserving judgment on Morton until 3 hours and 15 minutes from now when we do this again. Let's talk about the offenses. I assume we're starting with the Braves. This is, based on the way that I have it now, my number 2 stack, along with my number 3 leverage stack. So the most likely scenario here, this is my favorite team that I'm going to get to today.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who's pitching, but Josiah Gray, I think, is pretty good. So it's not prospect. Yeah, it's not a safe spot. Like, you could easily see Gray have a good game, but at the same time, Atlanta does have a lot of power in their lineup. Right now they're projected to pull about the ownership they deserve. We have them as the 7th highest top stack percentage. We have them getting about almost 6% ownership, getting about 5.5% chance of being the top stack. So pretty neutral spot to me. I think if it's not Gray, if it's someone worse, then clearly it gets better because Atlanta does have a lot of very dangerous hitters in their lineup.
Yeah, I don't really know how to manage with Gray right now. Clearly a big time prospect. I want to make sure that I get his rank correct, but I want to say that he's top 20 per Fangraphs.
That sounds right to me.
Josiah Gray. He is
19th.
On FanGraphs. Yep, there you go. 19th. Number one prospect for the Nats. We'll see what that means. 26% K rate via Steamer, which is obviously pretty nice coming into the league. 4.39 FIP, however. So I'm curious to see where that ends up. But for right now, until we get a line, until we get actual confirmation, I'm taking this with a bit of a grain of salt, but I really do like the Braves today. In particular, like Soler in the 2 spot, Albies leading off, Swanson in the 5 hole, all these guys showing up as guys that I would be quite a bit over the field on. Do you like any Nats against Morton, since we do know that piece?
No, I think it goes without saying that you can always play Juan Soto, but Morton's just, I think, a really good pitcher. And outside of Soto and Bell, there's just not hitters on the Nats that I really ever target.
Okay. Favorite hitter in this game? Let's just assume that Gray is on the bump.
Freeman.
Okay. Yeah, this one fits him perfectly. I don't have anything else here. Keep your eyes peeled. Tune in at 3:45 when Adam and I come back to do this. And maybe at that point in time, we'll have a little bit more information on the Nats. Moving it on, though. Phillies and Reds, 4.7 run implied total for the Phils, 3.7 for the Reds. Zach Wheeler, Tyler Mahle. Wheeler pulling pretty sizable ownership, 25% on DraftKings, 5% only on FanDuel, under 10% coming to Mahle on DraftKings. We'll start with Wheeler. I think this ownership is fully warranted. He is the most expensive pitcher on the slate. He is my highest projected pitcher, so I don't have much to add here. I think he should be owned.
Yeah, nothing really to add either. He's really good. The matchup is okay. Cincinnati does have some hitters that can do damage, especially basically 1 through 5. If Castellanos is in, like if you have India, Winker, Castellanos, Votto, Moustakas, that's a pretty tough group of hitters to get through. But Wheeler has been one of the better pitchers in baseball this year. He has only allowed 0.58 home runs per 9, 29.5% strikeout percentage, only a 5.5% walk percentage, 2.77 xFIP. Just really, really good pitcher. Also goes deep into games, which is nice. The salary is a little expensive, but more so relative to other pitchers on the slate than saying that I think Wheeler himself is overpriced. But I do think, he looks like the ownership's about where it should be. Second highest chance of being a top 2 pitcher, getting 22% ownership seems about right.
Yeah, I'm with it. Any Mahle for you? 8% owned on DK. He showed up a little bit lower than that for me. Heading into this park, heading into a lineup that I think is slightly better than the Reds. It seems like not the best spot in the world, but 7,100 is a price tag that's not all that bad. Yeah,
I like the price tag because you've seen recently with Mahle, like he's a boom or bust pitcher. He walks too many guys, but he also has very, very good strikeout stuff, and he gives up power. He struck out 28.5% of hitters this year. He has a 3.79 xFIP. He's not a bad pitcher. He's just volatile. And recently you've been getting him at like 9,800, 10,000. And it's kind of like you're taking on a lot of risk for that salary. Now it's going the other direction. He strikes out enough guys where, outside of the it's still possible he gets just completely lit up, of course, but he strikes out enough guys where he's going to, even in starts where he gives up a few runs, he's pretty likely to give you an okay score at 7,100. You also have a little bit of a banged up Philadelphia lineup. Real Muto may or may not be in it today. So I'm interested in him. The thing that I noticed, though, is I ran a crunch, or in the process of running a crunch, just sort of a very preliminary one, just to get an idea of roster construction. And Mally's only showing up like 5-6% of the time. So it makes me think that it's not very difficult to pay up for other pitchers today. And maybe that keeps the ownership in check. But we do have him as the 3rd highest top 2 pitcher percentage on the slate and only getting about 10% ownership.
I think it's going to be pretty easy to get to the top here, just given everything that I see. I'm even heavier at the top end than our current ownership is showing. So I think you can get there pretty easily. Let's talk a little bit about offense. I have the Phillies 9th on DK, 6th on FanDuel, more or less properly owned. I don't have too much of a take. This is just a team that sort of exists for me. If I get a little bit of Philly, I'm not mad about it because they're good, but do you have anything specific you want to touch on for the Phillies?
Not really. Tyler Mahle has had more issues actually with right-handed hitters this year, so it's something to keep in mind. He's allowed a 189 expected ISO to righties, 0.083 to lefties. Not saying you can't play Bryce Harper, but if Real Muto's in, I think he looks really good. McCutchen, decent value option. Segura is a reasonable value, but overall, I'm with you. It's just kind of a team that I don't really feel strongly about one way or the other. I think they're getting the ownership they deserve.
Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that neither one of us want to roster the Reds today.
Yeah, I'm good on not attacking Zach Wheeler.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the spot. There's just too many teams today to really want to worry about it. Pirates and Brewers. 3.8 run implied total for the Pirates, 5.2 for the Brew Crew. It's Mitch Keller. It's Brett Anderson. It's two guys pulling no ownership on FanDuel or DraftKings. Are they pulling ownership for you?
No, pretty tough spot to get to either pitcher. I think, it's a good matchup for Brett Anderson, but just seems pretty unnecessary on the slate given his lack of strikeout stuff. There's guys priced around him that have much better strikeout upside, Tyler Mahle being one of them, who we just talked about. On the other side, Mitch Keller is someone that I really liked as a pitching prospect, and I would take chances on him quite a bit when he first came up, even though he was inconsistent. But this year, the strikeout numbers haven't even really been there. He's only struck out 20% of hitters. He's still walking way too many guys with a 12% walk rate, 1.26 home runs per nine. I just don't really see much reason to get to either pitcher here. And then you also have weather concerns.
Let us start then with the Brewers bats, because that seems to be the better option. They are my number 5 stack, number 7 in leverage. This is a spot that I would like to get to. Nothing too crazy. Like, I don't have anybody as like a double-digit odds of being optimal just because it's such a big slate. And don't worry, we're going to get to the Red Sox in a bit where that one changes slightly. How are you feeling about Milwaukee against Keller?
The way it looks right now, it's probably the stack I get to the most. They have the second highest top stack percentage on DraftKings at 8%, only projected for about 4% ownership. This is a team that the lineup could potentially end up being a lot weaker than we would like it to be. We saw that yesterday. They still went out and scored 1 million runs, but you're still going to prefer that they have, Avisail Garcia and Rowdy Tellez in this lineup as opposed to Jace Peterson and I think it was Jackie Bradley got the start yesterday. Narvaez should be back, but either way, it's going to look like a good spot against Keller, but it'll look even better if you get Garcia and or Tellez in the lineup.
Yeah, like I have these guys grading out really well. Only like everyone but Colton Wong is better than their current ownership. So this is definitely a spot I want to get to. 5th overall, 7th in leverage. That's usually a combination for being one of my top 2-3 stacks. I do have Atlanta slightly ahead of them. We'll see where we actually end up as we get closer, but very little separation for me for both. What about Pittsburgh, though? A team that, to me, is probably slightly under-owned. I think they're probably middle of the pack in general. Do you have any interest in going to Pittsburgh? It's not the best spot in the world. It's not a great home run park, particularly for righties. And you got the lefty on the hill and Anderson, but I could see getting some shares.
I mean, they're cheap, so I can see getting there for that reason, but they're also, for the most part, really bad. Anderson this year is a lot of 188 expected ISO to righties. If you want to get to some $3,900 Key Brian Hayes or $3,700 Reynolds, I think that's fine. But I think it's more so going to just be, individual hitters than full stacks for me.
Yeah, that is a much better way to say that. I basically just stop at the 5 spot. So Park, Hayes, Reynolds, Nagowski, and Stallings is really all I want to do. And it's not like Stallings is someone that I'm clamoring for, but at the very least, he's a catcher. So it makes it a little bit easier. Go Brewers, I guess. We'll see where that ends up. 2nd in top stack. I'm a little surprised to see the Boston one not being a little bit higher, but we're going to touch on those guys in a little bit. But the lack of Milwaukee ownership is really appealing. We'll see where that ends up as we get further along in the day. Tigers and Guardians, 4.5 run implied total for Detroit, 4.7 for Cleveland. Tyler Alexander and Zach Plesac on the hill. No ownership to speak of here. I have a little bit of interest in Plesac. Are you interested in either pitcher? Plesac, 8,800 on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel.
No. Plesac, I mean, it's a high upside matchup against Detroit because they do have strikeouts in their lineup, but Plesac himself just not a particularly good pitcher. He has a 15.6% strikeout percentage this season. That's basically a point higher than Brett Anderson, which is just bad. He's allowed 1.7 home runs per nine, 4.76 xFIP. This is the kind of guy where on a slate like devoid of pitching, if you were like 6,500 or 7K, he'd be a pretty strong play. But 8,800 on a slate that has plenty of pitching and is a 14-game slate, so it's not going to be difficult to find low-owned plays anywhere. I just don't really see a reason.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I have Plesac at 4% on DK, at 6% on FanDuel. These are not guys that I try to get to a ton, but it's not a guy that never shows up for me. And I think the upside and just sort of the swing and miss in the Tigers is what I'd be looking at. What I really want to look at, though, would be the Cleveland offense. However, I assume that's like our biggest negative. Yep, it is. Certainly is. Well, second biggest. Cleveland is my number 3 overall stack and dead last for me in leverage. Bringing up the rear. What do you want to do with Cleveland against Tyler Alexander, given their current ownership situation?
I think it's a good spot. Tyler Alexander is pretty bad at pitching baseballs, but it's just one of these spots where, I mean, there's so many other teams. It's still pretty unlikely the Indians end up being the team you have to have. I think it's a good spot for their right-handed hitters, and they are reasonably priced. The only expensive hitters in this lineup are Ramirez and Reyes, who are just very, very good plays anyway. So I'm not saying, I don't think Cleveland does well. I'm not saying I don't like the Cleveland hitters, but you have 20% ownership going to Ramirez, 14% going to Rosario, about 12% going to Straw, Ramirez, and Reyes. That's a pretty sizable amount of ownership for a 14-game slate going to those 5 guys. So it seems like a spot where I probably get a little bit more to mini stacks or just individually using guys like Reyes and Ramirez with lower owned stacks.
That works for me. I don't have much else to add there. There's just too much ownership coming in. You want to pick these guys off individually and make sure you're putting them into certain lineups where you're not pulling as much chalk. I think that's fine, but I'm going to have a hard time ever saying that Cleveland is a team that I want to get to aggressively, just given that current ownership. I'm shocked to see how big it is.
I've heard that before. Sorry.
No need to apologize.
I couldn't.
You shouldn't.
I wasn't going to say it, but then you paused also. So I was just like, yeah.
Honestly, I wasn't even ready for that. My brain is mush today. Let's switch to the Tigers. Do you have any interest in going to Tigers bats?
Not really, just because the slate is there's so many teams. They're right now projected to be owned exactly where they should be: 2.6% top stack percentage, 2.6% ownership share. Plesac, not a good pitcher, as I already mentioned. I think a $3,200 Robbie Grossman is a very good salary. I don't mind getting there. Scope is a reasonable option as well because he has some power. But in terms of full stacks, I think there's still other spots that look better to me. Plesac has given up power to both sides of the plate. 210 expected ISO to righties, 198 to lefties. So you don't really need to be picky about who you're going to. Just go to guys with power if you're going there.
Schedule for the rest of the day at 2 p.m. Eastern, the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show. Eitan, Laffy, and Ben. This is going to be on the Fantasy Football channel, so you don't want to miss that. They're going to talk a little football from 2 to 3. Then at 3:45 Eastern, you and I will be back. MLB Deeper Dive. We're going an hour earlier than normal here. So Deeper Dive at 3:45. We'll break this one down all again. Any additional news that we get, we'll be able to update our thoughts. We'll be a little bit more dialed in. Then following us at 5 p.m., MLB Live Before Lock, Greg and Terry taking you up to 6, where we turn it over to the NFL Live Before Lock crew. That will be Eitan and Matt Kajeski taking you up to the 7 o'clock lock for preseason NFL. Plus, we've got some free content today. MLB Top Stacks, probably my favorite piece of content on our entire site. It drives everything for baseball. That is free. MMA Pro Plays, free as well. Time to talk about the big one for today. The Boston Red Sox and the Baltimore Orioles, 6.5 run implied total for the Sox, 4.5 for the Orioles. Nick Pivetta, Spencer Watkins. The floor is yours here. Do you want a pitcher? I don't get the sense this is a big one.
Pivetta is kind of interesting because there is plenty of upside going up against the Orioles team, and Pivetta does have pretty good stuff. He comes in with a 26.3% strikeout percentage, but it's another one where it's just difficult to get a lot of Pivetta because there are so many good pitchers on this slate. So not a priority for me, but I do think certainly a reasonable option where if, for example, Cleveland's the first team that comes to mind that we've talked about that's getting a lot of ownership. If you have Cleveland bats and you have your lineup's a little bit more popular than you would like, but you really want to get those Cleveland bats, Pivetta is the kind of guy that I think you can use because he's only getting about 3% ownership. He's certainly capable of going out there and giving you a big game. So in that sense, it's fine. But over a span of 150 lineups, I don't really see it being a priority. Spencer Watkins, just absolutely not.
All right. Well, talk to me about Boston. Massive, massive run total. Unquestionably my top stack, but quite a bit overowned even with that information, just given how many teams there are. I think that I will still get to them a little bit, just given how much separation I have. Separation isn't as big on the top stacks tool, so I'm really curious to see your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these spots, we've talked about it a lot because on these big slates, you normally have either a Coors Field game, or you have a team facing the Orioles that shows up like this, or a team facing, one of the other really bad teams. But it's a phenomenal spot. We have Boston with about a 11 to 12% chance of being the top stack on a slate with 28 teams. That's really high. But we also have them getting nearly 20% aggregate ownership. If you go individually and look through the team, the only hitter in the projected lineup that's getting less than 14% ownership on DraftKings is Franchy Cordero, who's probably going to be hitting toward the bottom of the order and possibly pinch hit for at some point during the game. So he's not super appealing. It's just another situation where, yes, I think the Red Sox are very clearly the top stack in terms of chances of success, and it's not going to feel good not being there, but you're just going to win more money over the course of a baseball season by going to some of the other very popular, or not very popular, very relatively high chance of success teams. Easy for me to say.
Yeah. You sound relatively high when you try to say that.
And, kind of just avoiding Boston. You can still get to their hitters, but keep in mind that, you're thinking about the total ownership of your lineup. So it becomes really difficult to keep that down if half of your lineup is going to guys 15 to 25% owned.
Yeah. So I have their top stack odds a bit higher than what we're currently showing. So I don't have it as big of a negative leverage spot as we're currently showing. So it's something that I'm going to really keep my eye on. Something like if Duran is hitting second, I think he stands out as something interesting. Cordero is not like super exciting to get to, but he would be the one guy that is probably a bit under owned based on everything that I have now. Really the biggest problem, and I use problem very loosely, is Xander Bogaerts at 25%, but it's Xander Bogaerts. Like, I'm not mad about taking him, and I understand why he's owned. I think I'll probably get there a little bit more than I was expecting, but it's really going to depend on what this ownership does as we get closer to lock.
And if anyone needed a reason to like Boston even more than the fact that, Spencer Watkins is pitching and Baltimore's bullpen is terrible. If you actually look at Watkins' split so far, granted it's a limited sample in the majors, but he's only struck out 12.3% of right-handed hitters, and he's allowed a 287 expected ISO. Lefties, he has struck out 20.6% with a 143 expected ISO. So I think he probably going forward just is bad against lefties too. But so far, he's really given it up to right-handed power. And now he gets to face Kike Hernandez, Xander Bogaerts, JD Martinez, Hunter Renfroe, all in front of the Green Monster.
Nothing bad could happen there for Spencer Watkins.
It's baseball. He'll probably go 6 shutout innings.
It wouldn't surprise. He'll do whatever it is that makes me lose money. That's for sure. What about the Orioles side of this one? Do you get there at all? 4.5 run implied total. Like, we see this big number for the Red Sox, but it's not as if the Orioles are in like a super bad spot. This isn't a bad lineup. Are you interested against Pivetta?
They're also getting a little bit more ownership than I would like, and I do respect Pivetta. He gives up power, so it's a spot where I don't mind targeting one-offs or mini stacks. It also depends kind of who's in the lineup, because we know Ryan Mountcastle is not going to be back, so that hurts the lineup. Mancini's looked lost recently, which I don't want to put too much stock into that, but it makes him a little bit less appealing, I think. Urias may or may not be in the lineup. He missed yesterday's game, questionable for today. So there's the potential for it to be a little bit weaker than normal. But, still Cedric Mullins at 4,300 is a pretty good salary. Santander, I don't know what this guy has to do to not be essentially minimum salary. He was really good last year, and then he got off to a slow start this year, dealt with a bunch of injuries. He's been hitting really well lately. Seems like maybe last year wasn't a fluke for him after all. So no idea why he's so cheap. He's someone that I think is one of the better value options.
Yeah, I actually have Baltimore 8th for the day, but probably properly owned to slightly over owned. So I think we're going to be able to find some better spots than this. Anything else you want to touch on Red Sox or Orioles?
No, just good hitting, good offensive spot, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, Mets and Dodgers, 3.7 run implied total for the Mets, 4.4 for the Dodgers. Tyler McGill and Julio Urias going for the Dodgers. Urias, 9% ownership on DK, 2% on FanDuel. No ownership going to McGill. Is there pitching here for you?
Urias, I think, is okay. He's a little bit more expensive than I would like, though. Only getting 8% ownership. He has the 4th highest chance of being a top 2 pitcher behind Ray, Wheeler, and Tyler Mahle. So I think he's an okay contrarian option. He's just a good pitcher. He has struck out 26.4% of hitters this year, 3.59 xFIP. Overpriced, I think, relative to the slate. Like, he shouldn't be $400 less expensive than Wheeler. He probably shouldn't be a lot more expensive than Ray or even Tyler Mahle from a DFS standpoint. But I do think if you need a lower owned pitcher, Urias is fine. No interest here in getting the McGill. He was someone that, like, when he first started pitching this year, he was someone we weren't that high on. He wasn't a really highly regarded prospect. He came out of the gate looking really, really good, but you have seen him start to struggle recently, which I don't think is surprising based on, our initial expectations for him. And then now you have him going up against the Dodgers. So no real interest there for me.
Any interest in the Dodgers offense? I was a little surprised to see that they didn't pop as much as I was expecting. They are 11th for me, 10th in leverage. They're sort of just part of the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in the Dodgers offense because they are so good. But right there with you, only a 4.5 implied run total here. Ownership looks like it's about where it should be. The one thing I will point out is it seems like Cody Bellinger might be coming around. We talk a lot about not caring about hot streaks and stuff like that. But in Bellinger's case, since there is a pretty good chance that his struggles were at least partially injury related, I do find it appealing that going into yesterday's game, he had hit 4 home runs in his last 4 games. He didn't homer yesterday, but he did fly out to the wall and then launch a ball into the upper deck that was just like a little bit foul. It seems like the power might be coming back for him. And if he was struggling because of injury, that's worth noting when he's only $4,100 here.
I feel like since now that I've been back from vacation and we've been talking about Bellinger, he's just on like an absolute heater.
Yeah,
it's fine by me.
Yeah, he's been great recently. I think they said, I don't even know if he got a hit yesterday, but again, this is just kind of pointless, but still sort of interesting. They said on yesterday's game that he was in the middle of like an 8-game hitting streak, and prior to that, his longest hitting streak all season was like 4 games.
Yeah, breaking out of it. Mets bats against Urias? Anything here? Pete Alonso, nothing else?
No, I'm good. Alonso's price tag came back up too, which makes him less appealing.
Yeah, I got nothing here. All right. Marlins and Cubbies, 3.8 run implied total for the Marlins, 3.5 for the Cubs. Jesus Luzardo going for Miami. Adbert Alzolay going for the Cubs. Luzardo and Alzolay both pulling 23% ownership. They're both in the 20s on FanDuel. This is a pitching matchup first and foremost. Let's talk about it. Who do you prefer?
I prefer Luzardo because he's cheaper. It's a good matchup for both guys. You're pitching in Miami, so it's a good park for pitching as well. Luzardo he struggled his last time out. That was in Coors Field. I don't really care. He struggled in his first start with Miami against the Yankees, but that's also a tough matchup. Here you got a Cubs team that just isn't really very good. Luzardo is still a pretty big question mark in terms of exactly what he is as a pitcher. He's very, very talented. He was really good coming up through the minor leagues for Oakland, and then he just fell off a cliff this year. Don't really know what to make of that, but as long as he's at $6,700 on DraftKings, I'm going to just bet on the talent and go ahead and roster him. He projects very well here. The only real issue is that he is getting a lot of ownership for a pitcher that has legitimate question marks about exactly what he is. But I still think that I'm more likely to get to him and then just, play contrarian offenses. And as far as Alzolay goes, I think it's a good spot for him. You're going to get a predominantly right-handed Miami lineup, most likely. Alzolay has just been absolutely dominant against right-handed hitters this year. 28.5% strikeout percentage, 133 expected ISO, 262 expected WOBA, allowed 2 righties for Alzolay. Lefties, on the other hand, he's only struck out 20%, and he's allowed a 292 expected ISO. So if you have him going up against a team with left-handed power, it's pretty dangerous, but none of that exists on Miami. So I think it looks like a very, very good spot for Alzolay.
So I actually had him coming in significantly lower. We've got him at 23% ownership on DraftKings, only showed up in 9% of lineups for me. Luzardo was basically spot on the mark. So I'm thinking
in that crunch I ran, the only constraints I put in were 2 uniques, 40% randomness, and 5-man stacks. And I capped each stack at 15% to make sure stuff got mixed up. And for the most part, the pitching is coming in give or take where we have it projected. I got 61% Jesus Luzardo.
What do you
25%?
What's he projected for?
Luzardo?
Yeah.
I have him at 17.8. Alex has him at 14.9.
Okay. I'm the meat in the sandwich. I got him at 15.8.
Yeah.
So.
Point being, and again, I'm not adjusting. I'm not saying if the slate started right now, I would play 60 whatever percent Luzardo because I didn't adjust for ownership in those lineups or anything. I'm just saying if I just like put numbers into Fantasy Cruncher, use some loose restraints and say go, Luzardo is just like off the charts.
So do you think that has anything to do, like, do you think that's driving his ownership a little bit too much? Are there any options to pay down that stand out to you out of the gate that, or like, do you just find that's fine at 23%?
I think it's fine at 23%. If you're looking to pivot, Tyler Mahle's the answer.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Or Patrick Sandoval, but I'd go to Mahle first.
Okay. Do you get to any offense here? Marlins or Cubs? They don't grade out well to me, but at the same time, we do have two pitchers sub 8K pulling north of 20% ownership. Is there any opportunity for leverage?
So I think if I'm going that route, I would go with the Cubs because I just think there's a little bit more uncertainty around exactly what Luzardo is at this point. Whereas Alzolay, we pretty much know what he is. Like he's been relatively good, and Miami we know is really, really bad. I think that if I'm going to look to leverage against one of these pitchers, Luzardo is the one that is a little bit more of a question mark.
Okay. Anything else here from Marlins and Cubbies?
Nope.
All right, guys, I got two promos for you, and it's not your typical fare. This is not MLB strategy show, one big word type stuff. First one we're starting with. This is the big one. You ready? Blitz, BLITZ, 25% off an Awesemo Plus NFL annual pass. Now, that's going to be a little bit of an outlay. That's why you want to use that promo code Blitz. That's a full season's worth of Awesemo Plus projections, ownership, top stacks, premium slack, and more. We have a ton of NFL content going on behind the scenes. You do not want to miss it. Save yourself some money. If you're going to be playing NFL DFS for the entire season, your best bet is to get in annually. Get in now using that promo code Blitz and save 25%. That's a big chunk of change. Don't leave that money on the table. Use that promo code. If we want to talk about real football, free soccer is the promo code. The Premier League is back starting today, but legitimately starting tomorrow. And we have soccer DFS projections. If you are interested in trying them out, you are in luck. Use that promo code and get your first week of Awesemo Plus soccer for free. That's it. It's free. Zilch, nada. Doesn't cost you a dime. Use that promo code free soccer, the real football, I might add, and get yourself those soccer projections.
I'm just ignoring you.
I figured you were. On to Rangers and A's. Rangers 3.6 run implied, total A's 4.5. It's Dane Dunning and Cole Irvin. No ownership coming here, but I'm anxious to see. Do you have any interest in either of the pitchers?
Not really on this slate. The Rangers are another one of those teams where any remotely competent pitcher going up against them has a decent ceiling. Just look at Marco Gonzalez yesterday. But you have Cole Irvin at 8,200. I think that essentially accounts for the matchup. And then, you just have so many high upside pitchers on this slate. Irvin has been okay this year. Really, really good walk rate at 4.4%, but he's only struck out 17.5% of hitters. I wouldn't be surprised if Irvin has a good game. I just think that with all the other pitching on the slate, it's difficult to get there. And then on the other side with Dunning, he's coming back from the injured list. He'd been relatively limited all season. His last three starts, he's thrown between 70 and 80 pitches. Really difficult matchup against Oakland as well. That's a pitcher where on smaller slates, I've rostered him a decent amount this year, but I don't really see getting him on the slate. Okay.
I had Irvin pop a little bit. He got to 10% in my sims earlier today, and at no ownership, that's at least mildly interesting. I don't think it's crazy. Not anybody that I'm going to really rally for, but it did stand out.
In the 500 lineups I crunched, again, with very loose restrictions, I got zero of either pitcher.
Well, there you go. Are you getting any of the offenses? I've got Oakland 15th overall, but they are my second best leverage stack because they are getting no ownership.
Yeah, I think they're an interesting team in tournaments. Like even in the lineups I crunched, I just didn't get to Oakland, and that's a spot where I crunch lineups differently for an actual slate, and I make sure I get to teams like Oakland. But it's a good sign that they're not, from an ownership standpoint, it's a good sign that they're just not showing up when I do something like I did before the show started, because it kind of just reinforces that they're very unlikely to get much ownership here. I love going to this team when they're low owned. There's just so much upside. They have power top to bottom in this lineup. Dunning is decent, but still not somebody that I'm really scared to take hitters against. I think that and you're getting Oakland outside of Oakland too, which is nice. They're expensive, especially Marte and Olsen in particular. But I think that they're a very good tournament stack.
Yeah, I'm with you there. This is a team that I'm definitely looking to target in some larger field GPPs because they aren't being touched outside of Matt Olson, and even he is sub 3%. So for all intents and purposes, just not being rostered. Are you rostering any Rangers?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you and me both. 26th of 28 teams today. There's no value here to speak of as far as I'm concerned. I don't have anything else to add. So we move on. Twins and Rays, 5-4 run implied total for the Twins, 5.1 for the Rays. Michael Pineda and Shane McClanahan. McClanahan getting 3% ownership on DraftKings and nothing on FanDuel. No ownership to Pineda. I like McClanahan a little bit here. Nothing too crazy. I'm curious where you stand.
Yeah, same boat. He didn't show up a whole lot in the crunch that I ran, but that just, again, reinforces that the ownership probably won't be there. We have him projected for, where is he? Oh, we have him projected for 3.5%, almost a 10% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. He's good. Like, he's got very good stuff. The matchup against Minnesota is okay. And the biggest thing that stands out to me is in his last start, he threw 92 pitches. He went 7 innings. So we've now gotten McClanahan going 6+ in 3 straight starts against the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Orioles. And that was kind of the biggest issue on him from a DFS standpoint earlier in the season was, he has a 28.1% strikeout percentage, which is great. 3.29 xFIP is very good. But it was kind of like, in 4 or 5 innings, how likely is this guy to really do damage at 7,800? Now, if this guy can go 6 or 7 innings, he has a legitimate ceiling here. He's another one where, you have all this ownership going to Alzolay, you have all the ownership going to Luzardo. McClanahan's a little bit more expensive, but the ceiling is really, really high, and he's not getting much ownership at all.
Yeah, I will happily, I have him projected ahead of Alzolay, and if he's at 3% ownership and Alzolay's at 23, this is a kind of no-brainer for me to, get him in that 15 to 20% range if I need to. Just looks good as far as I'm concerned. Any Pineda?
No. He's 5,900, so I see why people, or why, how you could make a case, but it just doesn't seem like risky, cheap pitching is all that necessary on the slate because you're going to have so much in the way of value hitters. You have Tyler Mahle at 7,100. You have Luzardo at 6,700. These are guys that have, legitimate strikeout stuff, legitimate ceilings. And then, you look to Michael Pineda, who has not been very good this year, just 20.5% strikeout percentage, 1.4 home runs per 9 in a tough matchup against Tampa, a lineup that just has power essentially top to bottom. I don't really see a case for getting to Pineda on this particular slate.
Do you see a case getting to the Rays bats, who
Yes.
I have ranked 7th, but I have them quite negatively leveraged, although all of that is coming into Brandon Lau and Nelson Cruz, who are pulling the ownership. It's a little bit lighter everywhere else. Checking the top stack tool, sort of in agreement. What do you want to do with Tampa?
So Tampa Bay is, as a stack, looking like they're going a little bit overowned, but like you said, a lot of that is just a couple players in particular. Brandon Lau pulling almost 20% on DraftKings. He's down to 4,600, so that's just a really, really good price on him. Nelson Cruz at 16%, Meadows at 11. Everyone else is sub 10. So you can still stack this team and not really be getting that much ownership. You include someone like a Rosarena at 5%, Wander Franco at 6%, Joey Wendell at 5.5%. Mix a couple of those guys in, you kind of do whatever you want with this stack. And I do think it's a good spot. Pineda has had power issues this year, about 1.4 home runs per 9, 198 expected ISO to lefties, 186 to righties. Neither of those numbers are very good. Park upgrade for Tampa Bay, getting out of Tropicana as well. So I do like the Rays because even though as a stack, it seems like they're going a little bit overowned, I think it's still pretty easy to get a relatively low owned group of 5 guys from Tampa Bay.
I'm with you there. Seeing Lau at 19, seeing Cruz at 17, nobody else above 9. It's very, very different from a stack perspective. Probably still a little overowned for me, but definitely a team that I'm still going to be getting to, considering they are my 7th overall. Do you have any interest in the Twins? This seems like a pretty rough spot here.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tough spot. McClanahan's good. The Rays pitching staff as a whole is good. The Twins offense, they have some power, but just not a lot of actually good hitters and 27 other teams to look to.
Yep. It's that easy for me. Let's see, 14, 2, 3, 4. When is my next break? I'm bad at math. I should start marking this off. One more to go. Royals and Cardinals. Royals 4-run implied total, Cardinals 4.5. It's Mike Minor, Jack Flaherty. Minor at 6% ownership on DraftKings. Flaherty at 13. I think both of these guys are going under owned today. What say you?
So Jack Flaherty is returning from the 60-day injured list. He hasn't pitched in the majors since May 31st. I'm pulling up his minor league game logs now to see what they look like, because that obviously makes a huge impact here. Exactly how deep can we expect Flaherty to go, in his return? In his most recent appearance, did he not? Okay, so August 6th, he went 4 innings. August 1st, he went 3 innings. I don't see anything about a specific pitch count for him, but he threw 75 pitches in the August 6th start. I'm guessing he can go like 90-ish pitches here. So seems like he's stretched out enough. It is a good matchup, or a decent matchup, at least against Kansas City. For the season, Flaherty has struck out 26% of hitters, about a 4 xFIP. I think he's a good play. I think that his ownership is about where it should be at 12%. He's 5th highest in the top 2 pitcher percentage. Yeah, I think he's a good play. I do think there's a little uncertainty, just given that it is his first start in 3 months.
Yeah, so I ended up giving him 5 2/3 at 8,300, and he showed up 18% of the time. But obviously, there is some ambiguity in how long he's going to be able to go after coming off of the DL. What are your thoughts on Minor at 6%?
6,400 is too cheap, but it kind of comes back to the same thing we've talked about a lot, where how necessary is it on this slate? I think the best argument for Minor is that if Luzardo is going to get 25 to 30% ownership, even though he does project better than Minor, you can certainly go to Minor as a pivot there in kind of just a 1v1, and and it's probably worth it. If you have a lower owned stack, you don't have to worry about it, but it's a spot where if you do have a more popular team, you can go to Minor. I don't anticipate getting really much more than the field there. In the crunch that I did, he showed up about 4% of the time. So, not like I was getting crazy amounts of him.
I got him in 13, so that was standing out at least a little bit to me. If we check out the top pitchers tool, 6% chance of being a top pitcher, 8% ownership, a little bit better from value, so probably a neutral play there. Nothing that I need to dig into all that much. Cardinals bats, meh. Royals bats, not good. I'm not going to be getting too much offense here. Are you?
I don't mind some of the Cardinals individually, because Minor has had some power issues this year. 209 actual ISO, 208 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. And you have some pretty cheap ones that have power on the Cardinals, depending on what the lineup looks like. Dylan Carlson, only 2,900. He, I believe, left yesterday's game early, so he may or may not be in the lineup. Tyler O'Neill has sat out 2 of the last 3 games. If he's in, he's only 3,400 with power. And then you have Goldschmidt and Arenado, who are more expensive, but also, known commodities. So I don't mind those guys sort of individually, but I don't think it's a spot where I'm going to be prioritizing, stacking the cards.
Same. It's not a great park for it. And I don't need to drive it in just because I'm going out on a limb and assuming you're not going to the Royals, or do you see some value there just because of Flaherty's sort of question marks?
The only thing I really see to point out, so for one, Salvador Perez is always one of the highest upside catcher options. That goes without saying. But Whit Merrifield at 3,600 is still kind of just mispriced. I don't like the matchup for him, but that's just, a good player that's cheap.
Yeah, he showed up as the best play for me in either side of this game, as a guy that's not getting any ownership and showed up in 5% of lineup. So don't mind one-offing Whit Merrifield at 3,600. That's all I got here. Anything else for you?
No, that's it.
If you are ever trying to bet on sports, boy, are you in luck. You should go to oddsshopper.com. It should be the first place you go, because shopping lines is going to be the most important thing that you can do. I don't care how good of a handicapper you think you are. You want to get the best lines. That will be the place where your bread gets buttered. You don't want to leave good lines on the table. And a lot of books will leave some stale lines out there for an extended amount of time. OddsShopper will let you browse across multiple books. You can set up notifications for line movement, or you can track your bets as well. Just trust me on this one. it's going to be a lot easier for you to use OddsShopper, scan for the best line, and then go to that book. I cannot wait till the state of North Carolina allows me to do all of that, but it doesn't make it any less true, even though that I can't do it. I still use it for our breakfast menu and for the wink wink books that I may or may not have to use. It's neither here nor there. You guys should be using that stuff, I promise. So go to OddsShopper. You're going to get expected ROI and expected win percentages on some of our player props. It's good stuff. There's a market there for you, I promise. So go to oddshopper.com. It doesn't have to be awesemo.oddshopper or oddshopper.awesemo.com anymore. We just have OddsShopper, which is really great to see. 4 more games to go. Angels and Astros, 4.1 run implied total for the Angels, 4.8 for the Stros. Patrick Sandoval, Zach Greinke, no ownership coming to these guys. Sandoval, minimal, 4% and 2%, but for all intents and purposes, no ownership. I'm very curious where you're going here. I'm guessing you're going to tell me that something's different with Greinke, but I have a little bit of interest in Greinke.
What do you mean that something's different?
I thought you were going to be like, oh, he's limited to 45 pitches, and that's why he's not getting any ownership or something like that.
No, he sucks. That's why he's not getting any ownership.
That too.
No, I mean, Greinke's okay. Like the matchup against the Angels is fine. There's plenty of strikeouts, especially since they've called up Marsh and Adele. That just adds so much strikeout upside to this lineup. You also got Jarrett Walsh back, which while he is actually a dangerous hitter, he strikes out. Max Stassi may or may not be back. He's a strikeout upgrade over Suzuki if he is. The issue is just that Greinke is a better real life pitcher than fantasy pitcher. He struck out 18% of hitters this year, 1.5 home runs per 9, 4.16 xFIP. He's fine, but I just don't really see him being a priority on this particular slate where there's a lot of strikeout upside at essentially every price point, whether you want to pay up, go mid-range, pay down. There's guys that really strike out a lot of hitters, and Greinke's not one of them. On the other side of this game with Sandoval, he is a very good strikeout pitcher. He has struck out 26.9% of hitters this year, 3.61 xFIP. The issue is that he's got a brutal matchup against Houston. And this is a team that's difficult to strike out. It's a team that has a lot of very, very good hitters. So I kind of mentioned it before when we were talking about Alzolay and Luzardo pulling that ownership. If you want to get to lower owned guys, I think 9% Tyler Mahle is the first one you look to. You can make the strikeout case for Sandoval at 7,300 and only 3% ownership. You just have to keep in mind that it's a very risky matchup. And there's good reason that his ownership's relatively low. And it's because he's pretty unlikely to have a really good start against the Astros.
I'm going to end up with Greinke, and it's going to bum me out. Here's my question for you. Zach Greinke, 8,500 unowned. Blake Snell, 8,400, 16% owned. Does any of that interest you?
I mean, I think Snell is the better play than Greinke.
Okay. I have Greinke ahead of Snell, so maybe I should be digging into that in the 3 hours we have in between shows. Let's talk Astros.
You have Greinke projected higher?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Go ahead. Give me your unfiltered thoughts.
I have Snell 3 points higher. Alex has Snell 3 points higher.
I feel like I'm out on a limb here. Astros bats, 10th overall for me and pulling a little bit of leverage. So I'm a little interested, but I don't love the spot. But 4.8 implied runs, not too shabby. Do you want to go to Houston?
It's just one of those spots where it's like, it's not a good spot for Houston, but they're such a talented offense that whenever they're low owned, there's some appeal. Sandoval has just really been good this year, even against righties, 25.5% strikeout percentage, only a 116 expected ISO. There's nothing I can point to on the Astros and say, oh, this is like a sneaky good spot. It's just that you're basically just betting on the talent that the Astros have, which is fine, but it's still, I think, a relatively low probability spot because Sandoval is good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And like I said, 10th overall is borderline a team that's going to get into a lot of my stuff. But if they maintain low ownership, I'm willing to take that bet at least on actual talent. I don't get the sense you're going to Angels bats.
No.
Easy peasy.
Ohtani obviously is fine, but other than that, nothing.
Yeah, that should just be like a pop-up when we say Angels.
Right.
Like, don't take this to heart. You can always roster Ohtani. Diamondbacks and Padres, 3.8 run implied total for the D-backs, 4.8 for the Pods. Madison, Bumgarner, and Blake Snell. Well, we just had this conversation. Talk to me about $8,400 Blake Snell at 16% ownership.
pretty wide range of outcomes given his struggles over the course of the season. He walks way too many guys. He has a 14% strike or 14% walk percentage, 1.2 home runs per 9. It can get ugly for him pretty quickly, but at the same time, he's got a massive ceiling and he's got a good matchup here against the Diamondbacks, who are one of the weakest offenses in baseball. They look a little bit better against left-handed pitching than they do against right-handed pitching, but still a spot where they're not very good. Snell has put together 3 good starts out of his last 4, which is nice to see for him. He has the 4th highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 28.6%. And one of the people ahead of him is Josiah Gray, who has only made a few starts. So one of the highest upside pitchers on the slate, reasonably priced, good matchup. There's a lot of volatility here because of the walks and just because he's been so all over the place this season. But just from an upside perspective and by extension, a projection standpoint, I think he looks very good at this price.
Obviously, massive upside. The thing that's likely slowing me down the most here is the fact that he just simply doesn't go deep into games, averaging 4.6 innings per start so far this season. Clouded a little bit by a start early and has been better as of late. But that's why I am as pessimistic as I am. Clearly a different ceiling though for him.
Yeah, and I think it is worth noting in his last 2 starts, he's thrown 108, 105 pitches. So that's good to see. You have to go back to June 4th for the last time he threw over 100 pitches prior to those 2 starts.
Yeah, it is definitely trending in a better direction for him. Seeing 13 Ks in his last start, massive. The strikeout upside is huge, but 5.7 walks per 9 this season is truly bonkers. It's a scary spot. I'm a little surprised to see him getting 16% ownership at 8,400 today. I guess the ceiling is just simply that high, but to me, it's skewing a little too high. We'll see where that actually ends up. We just saw him, 5 days ago against this Arizona team, mow down 13 of them. So he certainly doesn't have any problems there. Do you have any interest in the Diamondbacks bats against Snell?
Not really. I don't think he's getting enough ownership for me to really want to go there. I think, individually, Nick Ahmed at 2,800, if he's leading off, is a pretty good value. Kettle Marte is a good value. But overall, it's just a really weak offense.
Padres, on the other hand, I have as my number 4 stack for today, which is feeling pretty good. 8th for leverage. To me, this is a team going under-owned in a spot that kind of fits them a little bit.
Yeah, I like the spot here because they're not getting a ton of ownership. They're the 4th highest team in the top stack tool. 4% aggregate ownership, 6.5% chance of being the top stack. Bumgarner is just a pitcher that I don't think is very good. Like, he's still capable of having decent games from time to time, but for the season, he's only struck out 20.8% of right-handed hitters, 186 expected ISO, better strikeout percentage against lefties at 25%, but he's allowed some power there with a 171 expected ISO. And you've just got good hitters on the Padres. Even though you're missing Tatis, Pham, Machado, Cronenworth all have power. Nola, Hosmer, Frazier, Myers, Grisham, they're all just good hitters. And it's just a deep lineup top to bottom. So as long as they're not getting much ownership, I like going to them here. If the ownership does come up, I think it's a spot where I'd get away from pretty quickly because I don't feel that strongly about it.
Okay. Yeah, ownership is something I'll pay attention to closely. If Bumgarner was pulling any ownership, it would make me happier to get to the pods, but he is not. So it doesn't make me too excited, but I'm expecting them to be one of the teams that gets a nice chunk of 5-mans if we were going to lock right now instead of in hours. Anything else here?
Nope.
2 to go. Giants and Rockies, 4.6 run implied total for the Giants, 3-4 for the Rockies. Anthony Desclafani and Austin Gomber. Desclafani at 7% and 6% ownership across DK and FanDuel, respectively. No ownership to Gomber. Is this a Desclafani spot for you? 9K price tag.
I really like the matchup. I like Desclafani as a pitcher. I like the park. The only real concern I have is that he is coming back from a brief stint on the injured list with shoulder fatigue. That's one of the scariest things, I think, when you're rostering a pitcher in his first start back, because you really the assumption is that he's fine, but you really have no idea, what he's going to look like. That's obviously a problem, and it can affect you in so many ways. It can affect your velocity. It can affect your command. It can just lead to some really bad results. So I do think he's a little, that's one reason to pump the brakes a little bit. And then he also is relatively expensive for this slate when you have guys that are, cheaper than him that have so much strikeout upside. But that being said, you have the Rockies, getting about as big of a park downgrade as you can get. One of the worst offenses in baseball, if not the worst. And DeSclafani overall, putting aside the concerns about his shoulder, he's just a pretty good pitcher, 23% strikeout percentage, 3.93 xFIP. So I am interested in DeSclafani in tournaments, but I don't think it's, a slate where I just end up jamming in a ton of them.
Yeah, so I got him in 14% of my sims, so I'd be happy to be there, I guess, but it's certainly a scary spot. Here's a question for you. DeSclafani at 9K, Blake Snell at 8,400. Who are you more confident in for today?
I think Snell.
Okay. I guess confident is probably like you're more confident in the upside of Snell. They're probably both sort of scary.
Yeah, I'm not going to feel great. Like if you tell me either one of them has, just looks absolutely good, terrible, I'm not going to be surprised at all. But okay. I think Snell's still the one that I'd go to.
Okay. I guess I'll ask Gomber.
He's another Luzardo pivot. It's a very, very tough matchup, but it is a nice park upgrade for him. And he is, I think, actually a pretty decent pitcher. 25% strikeout percentage this year, 3.63 xFIP, and that's with his home starts coming in Colorado. Now he gets to go into San Francisco. So, I think when you're in most lineups, you're just going to play Luzardo, or you're going to play Minor, or you're going to play, you're just going to get out of that price range. But he is another one of these guys where individually, he's probably getting a little bit less ownership than he deserves relative to guys like Luzardo.
What do you think about the Giants? Now, they are middle of the pack in top stacks. I have them ranked 6th for me and as my number 1 leverage opportunity. There's no ownership really coming in here outside of Buster Posey. A lot of righties going up against Austin Gomber. Is this a spot for you?
Not really. Again, okay. I just think Gomber's good. And the other issue with the Giants when they go to these lineups where they have a lot of right-handed hitters is you run pinch hit risk later in the game. Like Austin Slater probably will lead off, but if he comes up in a high leverage spot in like the 6th or 7th inning against a right-handed pitcher, it's going to be Alex Dickerson or, Yastrzemski or whatever, left-handed hitter doesn't start. And to a lesser extent, that can be said for guys like Ruff and Flores and, Estrada as well. It's just the Giants. It's like every single hitter on the Giants pretty much is an above average hitter. So they can just do whatever they want throughout the course of the game and they don't really lose anything. So that makes it a little bit less appealing for me. And then also, Gomber against righties this year has a 25% strikeout percentage. He's allowed a 137 expected ISO. He's actually given up he's given up about the same amount of power to lefties and righties, but in terms of expected ISO, he's actually allowed a 182 expected ISO to lefties, only 137 to righties. So I don't even know how scary it is that he's going up against a bunch of right-handed hitters. He has a changeup. He throws 25% of the time to righties, has a 16% swinging strike percentage on it. Knuckle curve has a 14% swinging strike percentage. Sliders at 17.5%. He throws all those pitches 15 to 25% of the time. So he hasn't really had issues against righties anyway.
Okay. Got caught up looking at Hash Garage. We'll talk about that at a later date. Drop that into our Slack.
If you want any photos of fog rolling into San Francisco, hit me up.
I think I have those, but I took them myself. Any Rockies bats for you?
No.
They are 24th for me of 28 teams, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that as well. Let's close it out. Mariners and Blue Jays, 3.6 run implied total for the Mariners, 4.7 for the Jays, Chris Flexen and Robbie Ray. And we finally get here. Robbie Ray, 33% owned, the chalk pitcher of the day, 9,200 on DraftKings, 10,700 on FanDuel. So he's not pulling as much ownership. Is Robbie Ray your favorite pitcher today?
Yeah, I think he's just a really good combination of a decent matchup against Seattle, a very fair price tag. When you have Zach Wheeler going for 1,100 more and you have Julio Urias going for 700 more, I think Ray just looks a little bit underpriced. He has the highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 30%, 3.47 xFIP. The walk rate's down this year. The only real issue he has is that he does still give up quite a bit of power, 1.6 home runs per 9, but he's getting out of the Rogers Center / whatever the name of the stadium in Buffalo and in Dunedin is, where every fly ball is a home run. Much more favorable to pitch in Safeco, I think, from a power perspective. And, just really, really good strikeout stuff for him. So I do like Ray at 9,200 quite a bit.
Do you like him more than Zach Wheeler?
I think so, yeah. There is, a little bit of an ownership gap, but if I'm just ignoring ownership and crunching lineups, Ray showed up as the second highest owned guy for me behind Luzardo at like 55%.
Okay. I had them show up identically, 22% each. I have Wheeler projected slightly higher. Obviously, Wheeler a little bit more expensive. So the Ray, I don't want to say the Ray ownership concerns me because 33% is not concerning me at all. But given the two, I have them basically as a coin flip. Yeah. Do you have Chris Flexen at all?
No. I have Ray projected slightly higher, but essentially the same as Wheeler.
Okay.
But again, he's just less expensive, so he's going to show up a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Flexen, I'm good. Like he's been pretty good at limiting power this year, which has been somewhat surprising. 182 expected ice to righties, only 135 to lefties, but the strikeout stuff's just not there for him, and he's not really that inexpensive.
Blue Jays bats, a team that I generally get to a lot. Does not appear that today is going to be that day. 14th overall, 26th for leverage. This is a team that I will likely be avoiding. Are you going to any Toronto against Flexen?
Well, we have them projected to be under-owned. So the way it looks right now, I think so. We have them with the 5th highest top stack percentage at 6%, only about 4.7% aggregate ownership. Again, like Flexen isn't my favorite guy to pick on because he's so far this year done a pretty good job of limiting the damage against him somehow. But at the same time, if you're going to take a pitcher and he's going to, tell me that he's going to strike out around 16 to 17% of hitters, and I get to load up on guys like Springer, Guerrero, Semien, maybe Bichette if he's in the lineup, Hernandez, Gurriel, like guys that have this kind of power, it's just always going to be a really appealing spot to me, even with the bit of a park downgrade.
I'm going out on a limb and saying you're not targeting Mariners bats against Robbie Ray.
No. Individually, I think Mitch Haniger is a good play at 4,500. I think Ty France at 3,500 looks pretty good. But in terms of full stacking, I'm more inclined to just try and get a home run or two against Ray because that is where he tends to struggle.
Before we close this out, 89 likes. Let's bump that number up. We'll get over 100. Hit that thumbs up. Helps us out a ton. Let's sum it up for right now before we come back in a couple hours. Favorite stacks, favorite pitchers.
Milwaukee, Tampa Bay, Toronto in terms of favorite stacks. Favorite pitching is Ray, Wheeler, Luzardo.
Favorite stacks for me right now, I have to mention Boston, even though I do think that they are a little overowned, but I think they're on a completely different planet than everybody else today. Braves, Padres, Brewers, Giants, those are the teams standing out most to me. From a pitching perspective, Wheeler, Ray, DeSclafani, and I'm going to at least have a little bit of Zach Greinke. We'll see how great that ends up. Any final thoughts, Adam, before we get out of here?
Deep dive article will be out in the next hour or two. And then you and I will be back on an early version of the deeper dive at 3:30 or something?
3:45. So we will be back doing this whole bad boy once again. Thank you guys for joining us. Like, subscribe, notification bell, all that good stuff. Follow subscribe to the Awesemo Odds channel, subscribe to Awesemo Fantasy Football, betting you, the podcast feeds, everything. You want all things Awesemo. I promise you that. Good luck today, everybody. We'll be back in a couple hours. See you then.